So something really big has happened in our lives. Emily, Maddie, Ronan, and myself, we've officially hopped in the van and begun our van life journey. It's our best solution to trying to figure out how to be present with family when family is spread out in different states. If we had stayed in the Pacific Northwest, it does mean that he'd be around Emily's family, but it would mean that my family would only get to see him a couple days out of the year. So we've done our very best to downsize all of our earthly belongings and to hit the road. In one of our most recent experiences, I had the privilege of meeting with one of my dad's friends, Jenna. Jenna is an internationally competitive athlete, though the reality is that you probably wouldn't guess it when you first meet her. A number of years ago, Jenna was in an accident that, as you will hear, affected her life dramatically. I had the privilege of joining her and the rest of her paper route ride as I did a benefit ride to support her in the dreams of Jenna competing in the Olympics. Jenna is one of those people who's a complete, absolute inspiration, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to sit down and to talk with her. Now, more than ever, when it feels like so many of us are carrying these supernatural burdens, Jenna's story feels relatable. Her story of courage and fortitude and grit will absolutely leave you inspired. So without any further ado, enjoy this episode of I'm Listening with my new friend, Jenna. It sounds like you've shared your story a handful of times, right? Like with
Yeah, I've shared it more than a few times. I like to lead in with I share because a lot of people don't know and they tend to make their own assumptions without having the facts. And they fill in the blanks of their own perceptions or what they have seen in the past about people with disabilities, be that their own experiences or what the media says or just what they kind of see on the street. And, you know, a lot of times that is not an accurate picture. And so I like to tell people, yeah, this is what happened. This is, you know, how I've grown from that or changed my life because of that. And I really like to give it a more positive light than it really receives generally. And that's just because, I've seen why people have a negative view because I've experienced that difficulty in just having to adapt from being a functional, able-bodied person to somebody who lives with a disability.
So I'm curious, what is the narrative that you hear, or what is the narrative that people are kind of parroting oftentimes, whether in words or in actions? You're saying that we're learning things through our experiences, through the media, through just sheer ignorance. What is that narrative and how is that harmful to someone like you?
Well, firstly, they expect me to either be sick and very frail, or they see my wheelchair and even before talking to me, they assume that mentally or intellectually I'm also affected. So, I try to dispel that first off that, it's purely physical. My mind is cognitively totally sound and unaffected. So I like to kind of tear apart that joining of physical disability and mental disability because people seem to think that they're inherently connected and they're not. So first, there's been plenty of times where people have just come up and talk to me and they start talking to me like I'm a child or that I'm not going to understand what they're saying. And then when I talk back to them normal, they're like, oh, and then also on the sickly part or that I don't have any independence, like when I'm out in public and I'm by myself because I drive by myself, I run errands by myself, I go to school and do all those things as anybody else would. I get people, well, where is your caretaker? Or why are you out by yourself? Like I can't do those things. And I always say, well, I can do those things. And just because I'm in a wheelchair and I have a physical disability does not mean that I have to be monitored 24/7 or that I need care in the home or whatever else. Like that, they just automatically think that that's how it works. And when they see me acting independently, there's this curiosity and confusion as to, well, how is this possible? You know, like we see somebody out in the wild and they're not having a struggle, you know, like, and then I get people where they're like, oh, it's so awesome that you're out doing this. And I'm like, well, is it awesome when you go to the grocery store? Because, you know, from my perspective, it's kind of the same thing. It's not anything that anybody else would do on a daily basis. You know what I mean? So
not too long ago, I was in New York having dinner with some friends who I just met for the first time. And she felt comfortable in the conversation to bring up the fact that she is autistic. And I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, cool. And we continued with the conversation. Later, like maybe a week later, I was reading her Twitter and she said, I had the courage to tell some friends that I was autistic. Mm-hmm. And they didn't say, well, you don't seem autistic or something along those lines. And she said it was like the best compliment that I could have ever received. The fact that I almost literally ignored her kind of coming out moment of like, what, you're autistic? I didn't even respond in any way, shape, or form. And for her, it was like a massive compliment.
Totally identify. It's like, just let me do my thing. I'm not any different. Like, I don't have a life that's any different other than as far as my disability is concerned. But like my dreams are the same. My aspirations are the same. You know, how I see my life playing out has, I think, the same benchmarks and goals as any other person. And I think also the reason people have such a varied response to that is because in the past, you know, people with disabilities or people who were autistic or, you know, whatever, they were shut away for such a long time and deemed not able to contribute. And I think that like antiquated view, even though society has progressed in medically, you know, research wise, technology, like the social view has not caught up with that progression. And so they still view it through that way where they're like, oh, you know, this is abnormal, when in reality it's not. You know, just like how cancer research and all these other things have come, like the way it has allowed people who would normally die or not be able to function, they can function now. But for some reason, it has not caught up with the broader view of things. And then you get these, you know, caricature descriptions of people who live their lives this way. And often there is no consultation with actual people who live their lives that way. And so like when I see somebody with a disability depicted, you know, in media or books or even image wise, you know, you can automatically pick out, well, nobody who actually lives that way was consulted, because I can just pick out how somebody who doesn't know came up with this view, right? I mean, it's that's why I like to tell my story, because constantly it is, to me, I don't know if educational is the right term, but I like to show people that they don't need to ascribe to what is kind of being shoved in their face. It's different.
And this is why I'm so excited to be able to hear your story, because I think that it's one thing to say, hey, friends, don't say these things, or maybe say more of these things. And like, okay, that doesn't really have a lot of sticking or lasting power. It doesn't really stick in someone's mind. But when you get to hear someone's story and the way that they experience the world, I think it does actually lodge itself in a person's being.
Yeah.
And so I do want to hear, like, you know, some of the broad, whatever you're willing to share with us as far as story is, your accident, what has happened since then. Before we get there, though, I would love to kind of get a snapshot of who Jenna was as a human prior to all of these things happening, I get that. So what I know so far is you were a cyclist.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if the whole pursuit of nutrition was a pre.
It was.
It
yes,
was okay. So
yes.
so share with me, like, give me paint me a picture of who you were kind of before everything had taken place.
Okay. Well, I was a cyclist. I was going to community college because I was pursuing, well, I still am a nutrition and food science degree. So I was getting, the general ed out of the way. So I was currently, attending college. I was working part-time at Jamba Juice, and I was racing bikes and also training, and I was a runner and did yoga. Like, I was a multidisciplinary athlete, so basically full-time athlete. And I was just pursuing, physical fitness and trying new things and just enjoying, being in my 20s. Basically, I love to travel and just do all that kind of stuff. So, up until my accident, like, I was just trying to live my best life. A lot of my pursuits stemmed from, kind of really bad things that happened before that. So, like, back in 2007, I think it was 2007, I was attacked in front of my work. I was working at Starbucks, and we closed one night, and two guys who we think were gang members, they accosted us and tried to mug us. And in the process of that, I was hurt. The guy was trying to bash my head in, and he split open my head and was beating me up. And thankfully, it was stopped by somebody who drove up and witnessed it. So it didn't go any further than that. But that whole event, I was like, if this happens again, I need to defend myself. And so after that, I said, I'm going to become athletic. I am going to build muscle. I'm going to get lean. I'm going to, be able to run and fight, because I was all like, I figured out in that moment that I was not a flight. I was a fight person. It was very automatic in that moment. There was very little thought. It was just like something else took over and it played out the way it did. So I was like, okay, if this is how I'm going to react, I'm going to need to back that up.
So your journey into sport wasn't like a coping mechanism. It was a way for you to take control of your narrative.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
Absolutely. Because before that, not athletic at all. You could not find me doing any of that. I was a smoker. I drank a lot. I was, in basically early 20s party mode. And that was it. So you could never find me breaking a sweat anywhere. In fact, as a child, I was, considered overweight, and I got bullied for that a lot. I was really bad in PE. So athletics was never part of my life. But after that, I was just like, well, things have got to change, because, I was like, this is never going to stop happening. The statistics for young females being assaulted they're big. Yeah. And so I was like, there is probably a potential for this to happen again. And I want to be able to at least go down trying. Yeah.
So from my understanding, what my dad tells me, because you guys are friends, that you were quite the athlete. Like, you would kick butt on I don't know if it's just the cycling or you were competitive in
cycling. Was my main pursuit. I did other things around that, but it was more for like cross training purposes to be better on the bike.
Okay. What was why the bike? Why did you gravitate towards that?
I had just, growing up, I always had a bike. And then in high school, my mom severely delayed me getting a driver's license. So I had to ride a bike to commute. And in senior year of high school, I was visiting a friend at his job and the bike got stolen and I didn't have a bike and I really, really missed having a bike. So a few years went by and it was 2009 at this point, and I had been out of high school for 4 years, and I moved to Indiana, and I was moving out of my house for the first time, getting away, seeing, a goal of mine was to live in another state outside of California. So I was moving to Indiana, and I promised myself, I was like, when you get there, you're going to buy a new bike because I really missed having a bike. So I did. I went to the bike shop after moving there, found a nice little hybrid commuter bike because at that point, that's all I had known. I had like a Huffy or whatever, it wasn't a road bike that I would later ride. And I had that for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And I moved to Muncie, which is a college town. So Ball State University's there. And one night I forgot to close my garage and came out and the bike was gone. Yeah.
Can't get a break.
No, it was really sad. So in the short time I'd had that bike, I was riding on one of the local trails and I saw a time trialist and they were going fast and they had the whole gear on and I saw them and I thought, I want to go fast. I want to do
Ricky Bobby.
Yeah.
I want to go fast.
For real. I mean, it looked epic and I just was immediately attracted to it. So my mom and grandma took pity on me and they were like, oh, we're going to send you a couple $100. Like, go back to the bike shop and get another bike. So I did, but I got a used road bike this time because I wanted to mimic the position that I didn't know what a time trial bike was, but I was like, this person was sitting in this way and the guy at the shop was like, okay, this is more like what you're looking for. And the bike was an old steel Raleigh, too big for me because I'm only 5'1" and this was for a much taller female. It was a women specific bike, but I mean, it was a used bike and I had like $250. So, and we're in central Indiana. There's not like a huge cycling scene out there. So, that's what I got. And I just started riding more and more every day. And there was lots of long, old rail tracks that had been turned into like a bike trail or a walking trail or whatever. And, you could go forever. So that's just what I started doing and getting faster. And I mean, the Midwest is not great for cycling because
it's terrible.
It's awful.
I visited for the first time in last summer and it was miserable. Like I would not want to go biking there at all.
It sucks. It's summer's hot and humid, disgusting. And then there's
so why do you keep like, because I'm thinking like you're describing yourself as, a little bit overweight, not the athletic type initially. And so now you're starting a new discipline.
Right.
You have all these setbacks. Like why keep pushing forward?
Because I wanted to change. I mean, the desire to change was strong and I, was trying to gain my footing as an adult and independent. I'm 21. I'm getting out there and seeing what there is. And, I always wanted to really just try to have the greatest experience that I could. I've never really been afraid of getting my hands dirty per se. And, I was an artist a long time ago. I don't draw anymore, but, when I was doing art, my teachers were always pushing me like, you need to do more, you need to get better, and they would give me all this constructive criticism. And I think that from that, kind of grew that desire to keep trying to go to the next level because art is very competitive, and I write and writing is also very competitive. So to me, I was translating kind of that skill building into sports.
Yeah. In my experience with sport, like there's this phase in which you're like, I want to be, and you're like every morning getting up is really difficult. It's like this constant battle against, self kind of a thing. But then in my experience, there's also a moment where like there's a switch that happens and it's hard to know when, but now it's harder to take a rest day. And now you start to identify yourself as a different person. It starts to manifest in the way that you think and you talk and the way that you live. What was it like for you when that switch took place?
It really started to happen after I moved back from California. So I came back here to home, and I, obviously brought my bike back with me, and I started looking for other people to ride with, because in Indiana, I found no clubs. There was nobody. Yourself. Yeah, I was by myself. Yeah. And so I, just went on the internet and was looking around, and I found the Cycling Connection, which I am still a big part of today. And their rides on the internet looked so intimidating. And I thought
the distance,
to myself,
the elevation.
Yeah. And just, the way they described it, like the average pace and things like that. And at that time, I didn't have a bike computer. I was still really new, like within my first year of cycling. So I thought, oh, well, I'm going to have to do some work before I can go out with them, because, in my past work experience and school experience, I always never wanted to be that person that was unprepared. Like I wanted to show up and at least have some semblance of what I'm doing, so I don't like inconvenience the other people, I guess group project trauma from that, So I thought, okay, well, I have to get a little faster. I have to build my skill. So I found a local women's group that was a little more mellow, and they were willing to kind of take me under their wing and teach me. So I learned, basic mechanics skills and how to change a tire and, clean my bike and, just those basic things that you should just know. And then I was also going to school at the time. I was going to Chafee, and so I would ride my bike to school. And when I would get out of one of my classes, there was another guy who was coming in, and he also rode his bike to school. And he had the jersey on of the club that I was looking to join. So I talked to him and I said, hey, what's this club about? Can you tell me about them? I'm really looking to join, but I don't feel like I'm quite ready. And he said, well, you can ride with me, like I'll show you around and stuff. And so I did. And in the meantime of that, I was just, trying to make connections, and really just getting involved with people encouraged me to continue to grow and grow. And it was great. I got affiliated with the local bike shops, and then I met, when you start to ride in the community, you come across other cyclists just on the road. And so I met another cyclist. His name was David, and he, my first bike was a point of contention with a lot of the cyclists, because it was old, it didn't fit me, and it was stuck out like a sore thumb. Like they were like, you need to upgrade your equipment.
Cyclists are kind of anal about this. I borrowed my dad's mountain bike the other day, and I adjusted the seat by maybe an inch or two because I'm taller.
You touched
the He's seat. Like, oh my goodness, like I had it perfectly dialed in for me. I'm like, get over it, Dad. Like you're getting old. It's not that big of a difference. Right. But like I understand the culture. It's like, no, everything needs to be dialed. Like you're trying to lose a gram here, a gram there on the frame. So you're showing up with this rinky dinky steel frame still, right?
And I mean, it was a very old model. I mean, it had down tube shifters, which was severely outdated. I mean, they don't, at that point, that hadn't been used for a long time. So, I mean, people really noticed. And this guy, David, he was like, I see potential in you. I want to get you a new bike. And I was like floored. I was like, oh, well, wow. Okay. And so he, did some research and got some bikes, and we went and tried them out, and we found one, and he got it for me, and that just opened the door, and
confidence skyrocketing.
I started to fly. Sure. Well, because the other bike I had, my Raleigh, was full steel. It was very heavy. The components were, old and outdated. So when I got a bike that was aluminum and had, was only a couple years old, it wasn't brand new, but it was, within the realm, and that I had built a lot of strength trying to overcome on that other bike.
Your speed had to have like doubled.
It did. Oh yeah. And the handling and the frame was smaller, so it was able to fit me better. And, you know, when you're fighting a huge frame and then you go to a frame where, you know, your legs aren't hyperextended and your shoulders aren't pushed forward, I mean, that really helps. And so after that, the guy that I met at school, his name was Tim, and we started training together because he, you know, was getting into it too. And so we were kind of like trying to train to race. And after a little while, he goes, you should definitely race. He's like, I think you're ready. So I went down to a local race and raced, and I did super well. And after that, took off. I've raced ever since. Able body, I raced for 3 years, and then I had my accident, and I have been racing hand cycle since 2015. So I'm never looked back at that point. From then on, I was a competitive cyclist, and it was ingrained in my life, in just the culture of how I live, and that's it. So
you started cycling because of this incident that you had. You were wanting to redefine who you were.
Right.
Now you're a competitive cyclist. Like,
Yeah.
what does this do to your self-image? Because you've been told all kinds of things growing up, that you're incapable, and now you're placing, and now you're doing well.
Yeah.
Like, how does this shift the way that you see yourself and the world?
It was great. It opened up my mind to that I could do more than I thought I was ever capable of doing.
Did it trickle outside of the world of sport? Like this feeling that, oh, I'm capable. I can do more than I thought before.
Yeah, I think so. You know, in school, I've always been really a good student. So I think it was more like I just transferred that over to something physical. Because academically, I was always like, well, I can do anything academically. But for sport, it wasn't like that. So I think it got me more in touch with my body, which I didn't think was a really capable thing before that.
Did you feel like you were just like a brain in a jar kind of a thing in the past?
Yeah. And, you know, also like I mentioned before, like I would drink and smoke, and like I really had really bad habits. And so cycling allowed me to really break those habits. I mean, I stopped smoking. I turned down the drinking immensely. You know, I started reading books on cycling, and that's where the spark for nutrition came in, because I would read these books and they would have training regimens and nutrition. And so I thought, okay, well, this is a really great aspect to work on, because as an athlete, nutrition is key to progressing and maintaining and recovering. And so I just became really invested in that, and like fine tuning your body to perform, basically, because I had never experienced my body being able to perform. It was always just like my mind. So that was a huge transformative moment for me. And also, you know, it's difficult to be an athlete. And so the response I was getting from other people, they were like, oh, you know, you ride bikes and you do, that's crazy. Like I could never imagine doing that. And so I was getting positive reinforcement from that, because it made me feel like I was doing something that people thought they weren't even capable of doing. And I had never gotten a response like that before, because it was always like, oh, you know, like, that's her, who cares, you know, like she's good in school, so what, you know. But now it's like, oh, you're an athlete and you're strong, you know. And I loved hearing you're strong, because like as females, you don't really get you're strong a lot. You get you're pretty and you're smart and whatever, but physically as like a force, females aren't really recognized. I mean, sexually, sure, you're hot, you know, whatever, but to say, oh, you have strength and you're an athlete, like that was huge for me.
Yeah, so that's what I'm curious about. Like, what is the compliment of, oh, you're pretty versus like, dang, like you're kicking ass on the bike.
Right.
Like, how do those compliments land differently?
That was saying that I was strong on the bike was a much bigger compliment than, you know, my looks, because I can't change my physical looks. They're set. So the fact that I could change my cycling and get stronger and stronger and then go out on the road with other people and prove that I could back that up was amazing, you know. And cycling is a male dominated sport. And back in 2010, when I was, you know, 2010 to 2013, when I was really, really doing it, there really was not a large population of females who were cycling just in general and also racing. I mean, racing for females, like unless you were an elite level racer, there wasn't a lot for you to do. I mean, there was no like pipeline, or it was just local races, whatever. And if they had a female, like if 10 girls showed up, that was like a big thing, you know? So the fact that I was doing that, and, you know, often I would race in the male races, and the guys were just like, who is this girl coming in and racing like in our races? And that was something that, you know, really at that time, you really didn't see. Now it's commonplace. There's a huge population of females. They are really fast. They can hold their own with the men. And I love to see that. Also, sometimes I'm kind of bummed because I'm like, I was doing that, you know, and if I was still doing it in that arena, I'm sure like I would be super good at this point. Like I was good back then. Now I would be amazing. So I'm kind of sad I missed out on the reaping the benefits of starting that so early. But it's amazing to see the growth of female cycling. I love it.
So at this point in the story, if I understand it correctly, you've gone from this kind of almost like a caterpillar to butterfly transformation experience,
Yeah.
right? Like certainly not just physically, but mentally, the way that you conceptualize of yourself, the way that you move around the world. And then obviously something happens. Things take a dramatic turn that you weren't expecting.
Yeah. So
what was happening that day?
I was training. So there's a stage race in Arizona called Valley of the Sun, which I still do today and I absolutely love. And I had done the race the year before and I did not have a time trial bike. So that year in 2013, I had gotten a time trial bike and I was really excited to take it out there to the stage race and do the time trial with, you know, actual time trial equipment, because that's something I had never experienced before. And I was training on the bike that day. I was, you know, practicing my form, and I had done an interval ride and I was 5 minutes from being done. I mean, I was on my last interval coming in to finish, and I turned down like a 2-lane road and there was like an elementary school on the left-hand side. And I came around the corner, you know, I looked at the whole street. There was nobody going my direction. There was nobody coming the other direction. And it was totally clear. So I'm thinking, hey, let's hit it. This is a great time trial straight away to do this. So, you know, I tucked in and was doing my interval. And during that time, a gardening truck for the city had come around the corner and they passed me, and I registered them passing me. But, you know, because the reason I mentioned the school is because the school was in session. And so there was like you were not supposed to stop or park in that area because the street was so small. So I'm thinking, well, I know they can't stop there. They have to keep going. And if they're passing me, they're just going to move on. Well, they didn't just keep going. They pulled over right in front of me and stopped. And I basically went straight into the back of them at 25 miles an hour. And they later on in the police report, I read that they said they thought I was a car that hit them because I hit them so hard. And they pulled over because apparently they were going to do some gardening on like the public sidewalk or whatever for the city. And so they were allowed to pull over like in that area to do the work for the city. So I'm not totally convinced on that because, you know, why are you just going to pass somebody? Like, it was obvious they were passing me. Like, why are you just going to pull over? I had no time to react. Like, I hit them full force. Even if I would have put on my brakes, it still would have happened. Like, it was 100% unavoidable. And so, yeah, I mean, I hit them. I lost consciousness and fell off my bike. I was paralyzed instantly. So, like, and I lost my vision temporarily because basically what happened is my head hit the back of, like, you know, like it's a gardening truck. So they have like all their stuff in the back, right? And they have that like that little fence like around it. So there was this big steel like support bar for all that stuff there, and my head just basically hit that bar, and my whole body was like an accordion, so it kind of just like went like this. And so I split open my head, I lost some teeth, I broke my neck, I broke my back, I broke all my ribs, I had, you know, multiple contusions all over me, and then I had a spinal cord injury. So I basically fell off my bike and I regained consciousness, but I couldn't see. Like, everything was just black. So I didn't know if I was alive or what. I thought I was, but like it was just black and I couldn't feel anything because I was paralyzed. So eventually, after a few minutes, like my vision came back and all I could see was the sky. And I was like, okay, I'm not dead, but I can't really move. So something like, it was oddly calm.
You're not in pain because
I really didn't experience pain until I got to the hospital.
Okay.
So I think there was just so much adrenaline and everything going, like my body's just response to the trauma was kind of blocking that out temporarily. And then I see this woman's face like come into my view, and her face is terrified. And so at that point, I'm registering, oh, like this is really bad. And so I was kind of like feeling myself, and I got down to my leg and I could feel my leg with my hand, but I wasn't getting like that feedback from my leg. And I knew it was my leg. I could feel my bike shorts, and it was just familiar because, you know, I know my body. And I asked the lady, I said, what am I touching? And she says, that's your leg. So I was like, oh, I'm paralyzed. That's it. So at that point, I just was like, all right, take me away, basically. And like the cops came, and then I see the cop and his face is like, oh, and I'm like, oh, if a police officer's looking at me like this he sees a lot of stuff, and, you know, this is not good. So, you know, the police officer, he was very supportive, and he was like, you know, help is coming. Like, he was trying to stabilize me. He's like, don't move, you know, don't do anything. And, you know, at that point, like my whole face was split open and I had lost a couple of teeth. So like my face was bleeding a lot and I couldn't breathe. My lungs were collapsed. One of them was. So at that point, like I was just trying to breathe because it was just getting worse and worse. It felt like an elephant was sitting on me. So I was just taking shallow breaths, and, you know, eventually they load me up in the ambulance, and then they actually had to life flight me because they were trying to figure out where I was going to go. And the guys in the ambulance, I remember like listening to them arguing, and I'm like, guys, like, please figure something out. And they're like, no, we're gonna have to fly her because it's just gonna take too long to drive. So we had to wait for the helicopter to come. They flighted me to Loma Linda, and it took 15 minutes. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I mean, they had a fireman in the helicopter, and his sole purpose was to just sop the blood coming from my face. It was so disgusting, like blood in your eyes, and when your face is just bleeding and you can't breathe. It's nasty. So they get me to the hospital, and like at that point I was just like, okay, I know I'm not gonna die. Like, I didn't feel like my life was in danger, so I just knew I was really, really messed up. And I think that kind of helped me not be afraid, because I was like, okay, I'm definitely not dying. So I know I'm at a hospital, like, and my mom actually worked at the hospital where I was taken. So I was familiar. I'd been there many times. I knew the surgeon. She worked as a secretary in vascular surgery. So I was confident, like, where I was going, I was going to get good care. So like that didn't freak me out. I just couldn't breathe. I just wanted to breathe. So yeah.
So you're not thinking about, you know that you're not going to die. You're not thinking about the future. Like if I'm in that situation, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm never going to be able to cycle again or something. Like what? But it just seems like you're not even thinking about those things at that moment.
Okay, so if I back up a little bit, because I was a competitive cyclist, I would do, local races. One of the local races is Redlands Bicycle Classic. And it's a big stage race that they do. Pros show up, everything. And they they still have a paracycling series. So I knew hand cycles existed. I had volunteered for that race. I had personally raced in that race.
You were already thinking about that.
Yeah. And I was like, well, I know that I can still ride a bike if this is how it goes. So, I mean, inherently, I was just kind of like, I have to go through this. So there's no reason for me to freak out, because like, I can't change it. I don't know.
That's incredible. I mean, that's like not even a moment of despair. You're just already in like conquer mode. Like, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to make the best of it.
Well, I knew my paralysis was not going to go away. Just the way that it felt, I knew that it wasn't going to come back. The doctors didn't need to tell me you're paralyzed. I was like, I'm acutely aware of this. Like, it was just, I just knew. So yeah.
Did this level of kind of control remain? Was it a moment later where, okay, now despair settles in?
Oh no, there was the despair came and it lasted, believe me. I mean, it didn't keep me immune from going through that. I just knew at that time that there was gonna be a way in the future I was gonna be able to do things. But yeah, there was a lot I had to go through to get from injury to being, first of all, independent as a person with a disability, and then secondly, being a cyclist again. So I had to go through a lot. I mean, it took almost a year and a half before I rode again after that. So there was a period of huge adjustment, because I had to learn I had to let go of what I knew before and build up a whole new way of life, because nothing applied anymore. I had to figure out a new way to do everything. So, I mean, I guess long story short, I had a T8 complete spinal cord injury, and I broke my C2 in my neck, and I had to have spinal fusion. And my spine was basically shrapnel from how I hit and at the speed that I hit. And so they had to basically fuse my entire back because my vertebrae were destroyed. And there was no way I was going to come out of that with a recovery. And then with my neck, I had a through and through fracture, and I had to wear a neck brace and basically immobilize my neck for 4 months. And that was a huge struggle in recovery, because I couldn't move anything. So
I don't know much about like your belief system or worldview, but I would imagine a lot of people in your situation would be asking like the why God me kind of type of question. Was there
No, I mean, after my accident happened, like in the moments after, like I called out to Jesus. I was like, help me. And I just felt peace. And I just carried that peace with me. And I have gone to church, most of my life. I don't really go anymore, but up until that point, I always grew up in the church, and I always remembered that there was, a verse from the Bible, God doesn't give you anything that you can't handle. So I was just like, I can handle this. If this is my route in life, there is a huge reason for that, and I'm not going to question. And having that in my heart has, I think, led to why everything right now is like so beautiful, because I didn't hold on to what I had. I knew I had to move on, even though that was going to be so difficult. So I'm like, this is my new life. This is a second chance. And God wanted that for me. He set me on that path. He took me off my path and violently rerouted me. But it's because I knew there was going to be something that it was going to be more meaningful and impactful from that.
In just a second, I'm going to share a personal story with you as to why this episode hit so hard, why it feels so close to the heart. But before we do that, I want to take a moment to thank our special friends, our patrons. One of the most common questions that I get asked when people find out that I do YouTube for a living is, you can actually make money from doing this? And the reality is that, yeah, some content creators make really, really good money on the internet creating videos, but unfortunately this channel just isn't one of those. On this channel, the way that we're able to continue sharing stories like Jenna is because a group of people like yourself have decided that videos like this are worth supporting. If you haven't heard of it yet, Patreon is a way for you to partner with content creators that you believe in and to help fund episodes like this. So if you would like to pay it forward and to pledge a few dollars, you can do so over at patreon.com/jku. As a thank you for supporting this channel, you get access to episodes that don't air anywhere else on the internet, including this YouTube channel, as well as access to a bonus podcast that only patrons get, called the Super Secret Podcast. Again, if you want to support, you can do so over at patreon.com/jku.
This is what my dad has been telling me for the last couple of days. I don't know if I mentioned it up to this point in the interview and the monologues or not, but my dad. That's actually how we know each other. My dad was hit by a truck on a bike a month ago. And thankfully, it seems as though like major injuries, life-threatening injuries, are not really what we're facing at all. He's certainly dealing with things in his own way. But one thing that he's told me is that he feels that he's alive for a reason, that God still has a plan for his life. And he doesn't quite know what it is, or at least I don't know that he knows what it is explicitly, but he has a belief that that is the case.
Yeah.
What did it look like for you to try to discover what your life would be about after this? Was it a quick journey? Was it like, oh, here it is? Or was this a long, grueling, like...
It's still hard. I don't think it's ever gonna be easy. But God has a history of testing those that are closest to him. So I just feel like, well, this is the test. It's gonna be hard, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, this is what surprises me, because you don't seem like, so far in the story, you don't seem resentful in the least, but I think
I'm not.
On the phone, you told me, and I might be getting the words wrong, but it was some sentiments like that this was one of the best things that's ever happened.
It is, absolutely, 100%. I'll say that all day long.
Like, okay, so that is very hard for me to understand. Like, I see you, and like being able to spend the last however long with you, I get to see you interacting with your friends and everything. Like, okay, I can get a sense that you really do believe this.
Yeah.
Because you have something amazing and beautiful, but like, to believe that this is genuinely a good thing for you, like, it just, that feels so far away from me.
I get that a lot. It's just, I feel like if I would have continued on the path that I was on, yeah, it probably would have been awesome because everything was going awesome. But just how I live now, I have such a deep appreciation for things that I don't think ever would have crossed my mind before.
How so?
Well, number one, going back to how I experienced this growth with my body as an able-bodied person, now as a person with a disability, my body, I cannot believe how powerful it is and how capable it is, even without having function. It is still just strong as hell. And I would never know that if I didn't have to go through it every day. I mean, my health is still amazing. And the fact that I can function and have good health and live a life that is by all means normal, I mean, mad respect. I just,
For sure.
yeah. And then also like my injury and subsequent disability has put me into contact with people that I never would have met otherwise, and that have given so much to my life, and I hope that I give to theirs too. That I am just like so grateful for. And even my boyfriend Jeff, I mean, I don't know if I would have met him. I don't know if his life would be the same if he hadn't met me. And we both mutually feel like the life we're living now is like our glorious second chance. And I love that for both of us. He's struggled a lot too in his life. And I just feel like we're both working together to be the best people we can be. And I would never want to exchange that.
How do you, if you were to attempt to put words towards like your purpose now, you're talking about like God has a plan for your life. What would be your best attempt at defining your purpose right now?
I would say that firstly, I'm a voice. I have a testimony. I can say, this is what happened. This is how I feel about it. And it's not a bad thing. And secondly, I have the ability to speak out for other people who can't, because not everyone has the same support system that I have, and not everyone has the same opportunities that I do. And I feel like I can use those things to create a conversation and to change a narrative that, like I mentioned before, in my experience, can be really, really negative. And so I think it needs to be more in the public consciousness. So that to me is a huge driver. Like I'm always trying, like just on the street, like if people have questions, I want to answer them. If there's another person that I know that can't say something or get access to resources or whatever, like I hope that I can lead them on the right path or introduce them to people that can help them. And even through athletics, every day I'm out in public riding my hand cycle, somebody has seen it. They know that it exists. Hand cycling is not something that in America is well known at all. It's gained more momentum in the last few years, but I mean, when people see me on the street, they're like, what is that? And then I tell them I have a disability and they're like, wow, I didn't even know people with disabilities could ride bikes or even be athletes or even get outside. So, I mean, just showing people that, even in, as sort of a passive way of me just going down the street, it changes things. It gets people going. It gets people involved. I mean, I don't know what people do after they see me and they go home. But if they choose to use their abilities to help somebody else because I was riding my bike, that's amazing. So I think that is where my purpose comes in.
Well said. Beautiful. I would love for you to talk more about your community and the value of it and how you're attempting to pass that on to other people who have been through similar experiences like yourself. Just a couple of days ago, I got to be at an amazing event.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. You got choked up a little bit there when you were all by yourself, which, for me, I felt really honored to be able to that you would do that on the camera. Like, you were just vulnerable. It was awesome. But right now you have a massive community of people.
Yeah.
Where we're shooting this episode in your apartment is a bit of a whirlwind, because something amazing is happening, and there's no way that you would be able to get there without your community. So if you can talk about community and support and all of this, as well as the exciting thing that's around the corner.
Yeah. So my community, I mean,
this is the same community that you've been biking with before.
For over a decade.
Okay, so real quick before that, how did they respond to the accident?
Very well. They came in droves. They supported me from day one. I mean, they were in the hospital, bringing me food, keeping me company. After I recovered, so the ride that you were just at is an extension of a ride that first happened in 2014.
Something paper route, right?
Yeah, paper route ride. It's gone through a couple incarnations. But initially it was started to help me, because I was living outside of my household, and after my accident, I had to go back and live with my parents because I couldn't take care of myself at that point. So I had to get, a bed and furniture. I mean, I basically lost everything. My family had to go pack up all my belongings and just put them in my parents' house. And so I had, I didn't have a job anymore. And I, at that point, didn't have Social Security coming in. So they helped raise money to basically get me into a comfortable living situation at my parents' house. And that's how everything initially started. And it was a bike ride. And they all came together and donated money to help me, get back on my feet, basically. And so right from the get-go.
And you've had not only like large communities helping out, you've had specific individuals. In the same way that gentleman way back when bought that first bike for you.
Yeah.
I know that there's a story on one of these bikes that's in the room, right?
Both of them.
On both of them.
Yeah. They both have incredible stories.
Now I know something about cyclists, especially at your level, that these are not cheap toys.
No, hand cycles, take an expensive regular bike and double or triple it for a hand cycle. And
is that one of the things that you can share? But like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, hand cycles, like entry level, they're a lot. I mean, for an entry level hand bike, you're paying what a regular cyclist would pay for like a full carbon, like really nice setup. So, I mean, it sucks the price point for hand cycles because you're a person with a disability who probably doesn't have a huge income. And if you want to, do something to help yourself, it's like the price tag is automatically huge, which is vastly ridiculous and unfair. And that's why you don't see a large population of people with disabilities having access to those sorts of things. And that needs to change, but that's another conversation. But anyway, basically, I got my first hand cycle through my credit card and paid $6,000 for it. And it was just a recreational, no frills, just to get me going. And I rode that for almost a year. And I wanted to race, and I did the LA Marathon in that bike, but it was blatantly obvious that bike was not going to be able to cut it. So I was at the Redlands Classic, which I, had volunteered at and raced at previously. And that's where I got in touch with the wonderful Amber Neben and her Dare to Be project, which helps children with disabilities get cycling equipment or adaptive equipment to help them, because she really feels that like it needs to start younger. You know, like it's hard for adults, but like often children with disabilities are not even catered to at all, and they need physical activity too. So her organization works with the Redlands Classic to help get that equipment for children. But that particular year in 2014 or 2015, there was no children recipients, and they were like, well, we're going to give to an adult. And I was so fortunately chosen to be that adult to receive that gift. So that's where I got my first real like race ready hand cycle from Amber and her Dare to Be project, and that changed everything. So that alone is the community coming together and seeing a need and like taking a chance to fulfill that need. And from that moment on, my goal has been to give back through my hard work, because I'm like, I'm not going to waste this. You took a chance on me, and you know, I'm going to show you that you didn't waste that on me. So that really is where my Paralympic cycling dreams were born, because she Amber herself is a 2-time, gonna be soon 3-time Olympian. So I was like, wow, this is just, the stars are coming together. And then I rode that bike for a long time, up until 2019, and did incredible things on that bike. Just things that I broke through every wall. My goal after I got that equipment was to break every barrier I possibly could. And I did that. It was amazing.
What kind of barriers are you talking about?
How long can I go? How much can I climb? How many miles can I do in a year? Racing, traveling to races, getting on a hand cycling team, just upping my cycling ability with my arms and becoming a elite paracyclist. I mean, it was just, I was like, if there's a limit, I'm going to break it.
And so now, I guess this brings us to kind of the purpose of the race this last weekend,
Yes.
right? Or not race, the ride this last weekend.
Right. So, the charity rides have evolved into the paper route ride, which in 2017 turned into a fundraiser to help me support my Paralympic dreams, which is going to be Tokyo in 2021 this summer. And so with the gift of my bikes, I have been able to become a Team USA athlete. I started international racing in 2019 and got on the Team USA in July of 19. And I've been on the team ever since. I trained hard through COVID, and we've gotten to the point to where now Paralympic trials are next week, and I will be racing for my bid to be on the Tokyo Paralympic team. So, wow. See, the fact that I get to say words like that is why I'm like, this is the best thing ever. Because as an able-bodied person, no way I was going to Olympics. That sailed. I was too old, even though I was only 25, but in cycling years, that's like really old. Yeah.
What does that make my dad?
Elderly. Oh, but so yeah, I'm hoping to make it to Tokyo. I have trained super duper hard for this. I feel like my chances are good. I went to Belgium last month and got a bronze medal. Yeah. Yes, in UCI paracycling, Road World Cup. That's my third World Cup medal. So I know that I'm still hitting the marks for, trend of improving performance and performing at national standard, which is really important, if you want to progress to the Tokyo team. So I feel like I am a valid contender, and I'm going to go try to make that a reality.
That's so cool. I love that. I mean, it's just, I get choked up when I hear stories like this. When I hear stories of people who've faced impossible odds and yet come out swinging every time, and no matter the setback, they're still pushing hard. And like, I mean, it just says so much about you that you're here today.
Well, and back to my community, I could not do it without them. They are so dedicated. Like, they know that I want it, and they know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes, and they have gotten on board with that and stepped up. I mean, I never ride alone outside ever, because it's just too dangerous, and my accident happened when I was alone, and I don't want to have a repeat. So, I mean, I have a dedicated group of people who ride with me outside. They help me when I need to do indoor rides. They, come over, they help me work on my bike. Like, they give their time and their love just so generously. And,
were you expecting that?
No.
Because you had a great team of people before.
I did.
They certainly showed up in a moment of crisis, but I would imagine that a lot of people that go through these big crisis moments, there's like a wave of support, and then it kind of like dies down.
And that happened. And there was people who did leave. They stuck around till, maybe a year or two later, some, even less than that. And they just were kind of like, they didn't say it to my face, but it was pretty obvious that they just didn't want to deal with it, or it was too much for them. And
was that a painful
very much so, because you realize that you have to confront the fact that people that you thought were really diehards were not. But conversely, there were people who didn't even know me and stepped up and like, we are family now. And it allowed the true caliber people to come up. And I would rather have them than the people who just faded into obscurity. I mean, I know a lot of people, like Jeff has never known me as a walking person. Like, he has only known me in a wheelchair, and he doesn't care. He loves me so much. And I would rather, like, he had no preconceived like image of me before that. So I didn't have to like live up to anything. It was like, that's just how he's known me. And then the people who did stick around and that they knew me, they still talk about like the things that I did before I was injured. And like that story has become kind of like, I don't know, community lore. Like, if you got people together and I wasn't there and you talked about me, like, they'd be like, oh yeah, this and that. And they still bring up stories from years and years ago. And like, I love that, because they've seen me before and they've seen me transform, and they celebrate what it is now.
It's not tough to hear stories about before?
No. I love it, because I'm like, if that was truly going to be the end for me, no regrets. Like, I was living a solid life, right? Like, I was making an impression. I was working hard. I was leaving my mark, like all young people want to do. So the fact that I had done that without even really, like, just by my own motivations, and not because, I wanted to be some hero or something. Like, I was like, that means a lot, because you hear lots of stories of people where their life just somehow gets away from them and they've never accomplished what they thought they were going to do.
So actually this, I wasn't sure if I was confident enough to wade into this specific like question, because I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but like this idea, like you're touching on this idea that people have goals in their mind that they may or may not accomplish, but you found this beautiful sense where even without the goals, like your life has beautiful meaning and purpose. So I'm willing to kind of tiptoe here.
Yeah.
But as you think about what happens in the next week, and obviously there's one great part of the story where it's like, oh my goodness, you nailed it and you get to go to Tokyo and all these things. And of course, that's what I want for you. And then there's the other very real possibility.
There is an alternative, yes.
How do you deal with the pressures of like, you got so many people in your corner? So there's certainly a sense of like you want to step up to the plate as best as you can.
Absolutely.
And then there's also contending with the reality that there's only so many spots.
Right. And that is something that I have had to confront and process like for a couple of years now, because you know that there's only a limited number. And, you know, in 2020, in February, before, you know, everything really went to hell, you know, there was a Team USA camp and all of the athletes are there and the team is big. I mean, it's over 20 people, like the whole entirety of the US paracycling team. And, you know, they had a seminar talking about Tokyo and what was going to happen. And you know, I was looking around the room because that was my first time ever being at a camp. You know, I was the new kid and, you know, I had to think, you know, the thoughts in my head were like, not everyone in this room is going to be able to go. Like there's only a handful of people who are actually going to go. And I could tell that other people were thinking that because the energy in the room was just like, it was tense because everyone wants to go and you have to, like, it's obvious that that's not going to happen. So at that point, I already was thinking about the alternative.
This last section of the interview is definitely my most favorite. By now, the Olympics have come and gone, and we know definitively what has happened when Jenna went out to try and qualify in her last race. Unfortunately, Jenna did not qualify, and seemingly this chapter closes as a failure. I debated taking this section out of the interview, but after listening to it again, I'm more compelled than ever to share this with you guys because it's an amazing demonstration of Jenna's fortitude, her courage, and her strength. This right here is, in my opinion, what makes, well, maybe not everything, but definitely part of what makes Jenna such an amazing person and athlete.
You cannot hate yourself if you don't make it. Because, like, honestly, in the past, before my injury, since my injury, you know, whatever, there have been things that I've really wanted and didn't get. And then later on, it turned out to be a really good thing that it didn't happen. And so, to me, that is another instance. If it doesn't happen, it wasn't time.
It sounds reminiscent of when you had your accidents and the hope that you had and the belief that God was there and orchestrating your life one way or the other.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think that opportunity is totally lost. I mean, there are games in the future I can go to. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I'm just going to hang it up and be like, well, this is the end. You know, no, it will not be the end. The fact that in 2028, the games are going to be here in LA, I want to be at that because that's in our home. You know, what an amazing opportunity that is. So, yeah, I mean, to me, that's just how I kind of take things in stride. And, you know, I've had a really bad thing happen to me. And so I know that I came back from that. So any setbacks or struggles, I'm like, this is a growth opportunity. 100% growth. That's how I see it. So I'm like, okay, it's time for you to do some work. Like, you weren't ready yet. Because I mean, it's an awkward position to be in when you're expected to do something and you just don't feel like you can pull it off. And I've had to deal with those feelings as an athlete, especially after I got on Team USA and being in the presence of other athletes that are like of huge caliber, that have been to Paralympic games before, who have been athletes for double, triple the time I've been a para athlete. That's super intimidating. And going from amateur to elite is a huge jump. And then to maintain that is you have to make it your life. And even if you do that, success is not always guaranteed. And so like you have to really just be okay with whatever happens. And that's not necessarily like a reflection upon you as a person or whatever. I mean, if you're not working hard and you're not doing the work, then yeah, that is your fault. But if you are working hard and you're doing the best that you can do, and you know that that's how you've been conducting yourself, then you shouldn't feel bad about that. No way.
I guess maybe one of the last things I'd love for you to comment on is just like the way that you approach challenges or adversity in your life. Like, I think it's crystal clear that you see the world differently than maybe the quote unquote normal person does. And I think it's actually it's an asset. It's awesome. Like the fact that you could be so positive and so like you're going to take control and make the best of every situation. Like it blows my mind. And so like if there's someone out there who's facing a similar circumstance, or maybe even something that's not so dramatic per se.
Yeah. How
do you approach these challenges? How do you think about them? And what is maybe a bit of advice to anyone going through something right now?
I would say that instead of thinking of it like as a loss, think about it as to how you can be better because of it. You know, if you keep thinking about what you don't have, you will just bring yourself down no matter what. You won't feel like there is a future. Like, you have to focus on what is there and what can be had. And I would say that's the biggest thing, because, and also struggle and adversity brings growth 100%. There have been times where things have happened and in the moment I'm just like, another thing. But then I have to say, well, okay, what weak spots are we working on here? Because there is a reason. What do you need to grow from and work on because of this? And I think if you just keep working on yourself, the progress will come. Because if you stay where you are, nothing is going to happen. Like, keep moving forward. That's what I always tell myself. Forward. I say that word all the time. And it's just because if you look in the past, that's already done. Like, what can you gain? Like, you can look at your experiences, you can learn from them, but you always have to go forward. Time is going forward. Everything is moving in that direction. So just try to do that yourself. And sometimes that is small, and it can start small and then get bigger. I mean, let me tell you, there are times even recently where the smallest thing seems huge. And the thought process can be, well, I've done way more than this in the past. Why can't I do this now? And you cannot judge yourself like that. You have to be like, well, this is where I'm at now. And so we have to work with this. You can't tear yourself down because today getting dressed and brushing your teeth is hard. Because believe me, there are people everywhere where doing those basic tasks are just like, ugh, they suck. But if you do that and you're like, I did it today, so then I can do something else or whatever, like, just keep moving with that. You know, it doesn't have to be this huge, like, moment, historical, amazing thing. It can be little, because those little moments lead to bigger moments, which leads to long-term progress. Like, there's no way you can get anywhere overnight, and you have to live in those weird moments where things are small. But that doesn't mean you should just stop, because that's not what you think is ideal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Beautiful. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to say or share or to include in your story.
I would just say, I want to preach some self-love for a second. I have learned through all of this just to love myself.
Was that hard before?
Yeah, it was, because, I was around people who were bad for me, who didn't appreciate me, who used me, who abused me. And when you are around people like that, you start to believe all those things about yourself. And I did. But now, like, I can confidently go through life and be like, I know who I am, and I don't question that. And so for people out there, I just want to say, really look at who you are and try to love yourself, because when you love yourself, you can go out and you can love others confidently, and you can help others so much more when you have, that light in your heart. Really. And I've done so much more since I've decided to really trust myself than I ever did before. I mean, sure, I did a lot of things, but it wasn't as outward reaching as it is now. And it feels so good to just give, I don't know, I'm kind of losing it, but
How did you get to that place where you were able to say that you know who you are, that you love yourself, that you got that light inside of you?
I had to struggle. I had to get all the way to the bottom and come back up. I mean, like, my accident stripped me raw to everything. I was 25 years old. I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't live independently. I lost everything. I had people telling me they would commit suicide if what happened to me happened to them. To my face. When you have somebody tell you to your face that your life would make them want to kill themselves, that's not a fun thing to hear. And I've heard that multiple times, not just from one person, but like, and I've had it said to me when I was doing things. Like, one time I was getting into my car and, I have to take my wheelchair apart to get in my car and stuff. And it's just what I do every day to be independent. And I had some person stand and watching me do that and was like, instead of being like, wow, you're independent and whatever, like, not that I'm looking for praise or anything, but instead of looking at the positive aspect of that, they were like, wow, if I had to do that every day, I'd kill myself. And it's like, is that really what you feel is something you need to say? Like, you can't just keep that to yourself for real? Like that my life is so, you see what I'm doing in this moment, and that is so bleak and despairing to you that you would choose death over having to do this action, like, it just blows my mind how unfiltered people can be when they're talking to other people. But it's like, come on. So when I hear things like that, at first it was hard to be like, yeah, I'm going to turn this around and make myself the star of my own life and then help other people through that.
Where did you find this sense of value and meaning and purpose in your life?
Really, it's just honestly grown from my faith. It has given me strength a lot through a lot of tough times.
Would you be willing to tell me a little bit more about that?
You gotta pray. I mean, I pray, and holding on to the things are going to get better. That is powerful in itself. It gives you motivation. It really does. Not too far in the distant past, I was extremely depressed for over a year. The longest time I had ever, I've experienced that times before, but that was the longest like sustained time. And I wanted to quit everything. I wasn't riding my bike. I hated going to school. I didn't want to get out of bed. Like things were just all time low. And I had to keep reminding myself in those awful moments, like, this is not going to last forever. And it's not going to last forever. So just holding on to that. And it's been a long recovery. I mean, I feel like I will always battle, depression and anxiety throughout my life. But, when you come out of it, like now where I'm at, it's taken almost 2 years to get from really, really bad until now. I'm like, wow, this is the best time of my life. I'm on the verge of seeing my dreams come true. Like, I have so much to be grateful for. And that was born out of a darkness. So, I mean, you just can't give up. I hate saying that. It sounds so cliche, but it's real. It is real. And you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. You have to have faith that it is going to play out and it is going to happen. Like, trying to have control over the future is fruitless. Like, it really is. Like, if you want to have massive control over everything that happens in your life, you're going to be so tired. You're not going to have energy to do anything good. I mean, the fear that control breeds is crippling. Like, you can't have any fear. I mean, a lot of people, like, sometimes I frustrate people because they're like, how are you not afraid? Like, they will be afraid and I won't. And I'm just like, dude, it's going to be what it's going to be. So, like, I don't have time to be afraid. I mean, I still get nervous. I still experience emotions. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I'm just like,
you're not a robot,
undefeatable.
obviously.
Yeah, like but you have to just live in those moments of uncomfortable, and like, you'll come out of it. It will pass. It will pass. Absolutely. Like, if I'm having a bad day and I'm just feeling like crap and I don't want to do anything, it's like, sometimes I just tell myself, I'm like, just go through it. Go through it. Stop sitting at the door and not going through it. Like, you just have to just grit your teeth, like, and do it. Cause the other side is there. So, I mean, just take those roadblocks away. And you have to experience life. I think that's what it boils down to. It's like, your experience is going to happen. Don't lock yourself away from that experience. Like, open your heart. Life hurts. It's hard. You can never take that out of life. Everyone hurts. Everyone feels pain. Everyone feels sorrow. Everyone's heart breaks. But then you move through that and you're like, yeah, I remember that heartbreak. I remember how it feels. I can comfort somebody whose heart is breaking. My own heart breaks a lot. And I just have to be like, it's okay. You will heal. Healing. It's important.
and go to therapy if you need it. I am in therapy. No shame. Okay. I've been in therapy many times throughout my life. And a lot of the times I didn't feel like it helped. So, but it will help eventually. So, PSA, if you need help with your mental health, seek out help. It will make a huge difference in your life. For real. And tell the people that you love them.
Thank you so much for just so brilliantly and courageously sharing your story with us. Man, I have so much respect for you. You're incredible. Like you really are. And I'm sure you already know this, but like you're just such a strong person, and who happens to cycle really well. Right? Like,
Yeah.
you're strong physically, but you're a strong person, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm in awe. I know I would say like, oh, you know, I know, I want you to know that you're inspiring people. Like, you already know this. Like, you've got a whole community of people around you that love you and value you and care about you. Whether you win every race that you possibly could, or you're just waking up every morning and doing
Right.
you. Like, you're enough. You're beautiful.
That's the best thing in the world, right?
I feel like my life is better having met you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I thank you for allowing me to express. You know, it's I think people need to see vulnerability. I think vulnerability is very important because, you know, there's a lot of hiding that goes on. You know, there's so many facades that people can put up, and vulnerability is something that as humans we all experience. So, I mean, yeah, like have the courage to be vulnerable.
Well, I wish you every bit of success in the next week.
Thank you so much.
I'll be staying tuned and following the journey.
This is the part of the episode that I throw the question back to you, the audience. You've heard her story, you've processed through the entire journey, and I want to know what you're thinking. What are your takeaways? What are you processing through, and what are you trying to take with you as you move out the rest of your life? For me, there was a line towards the end of Jenna's episode that was maybe almost a throwaway, but really had a lasting impact on me. And it was this idea of telling the people that you love in your life, tell them that you love them. Jenna's story demonstrates such a brutal fact about life that it can change in a moment. Sometimes those changes are great, and sometimes those changes are not so great. Her story reveals that while it's a good and noble thing to pursue accolades and to do your best to try and win accomplishments, at the end of the day, this shouldn't be what you define your life by. This shouldn't be what matters most to you in life. Instead, the things that matter most are relationships, community, surrounding yourself by the people that love you and that you love as well. This is exactly where I feel called to in this exact season of my life, to help grow deeper roots and to build a stronger community around my family, to make sure that my son Maddie grows up every single day being surrounded by people that care for him, knowing that he matters and that his story is going to be making a difference in the lives of people around him.